0.72. That is the number of children the average South Korean woman is having right now. Not 1, not 0.9, 0.72. If you start with a room of 100 South Koreans today, their grandchildren's room holds 37 people. The room after that? 13, and the government knows. They have been throwing money at this problem for 30 years. Bonuses, tax breaks, free childcare, national ad campaigns basically begging citizens to have babies. The fertility rate kept falling. This isn't a South Korea problem. South Korea is just the canary, and the coal mine is everywhere. Europe, China, Japan, Latin America, and yes, the United States. What you're about to hear is not a prediction. It is not a theory. It is arithmetic, and the math is already done. The only question left is whether you're willing to look at it. Let's start with the most uncomfortable fact in all of demography. No developed country in recorded history has ever pulled its fertility rate back up to replacement level once it dropped below. Not one, not ever. Not Japan, not Germany, not Singapore, not Sweden, despite being the poster child for parental leave so generous it practically comes with a massage. The United States right now sits at 1.62, the lowest in American history outside of the Great Depression. And before you say, well, we're not South Korea, you're right. But here is what keeps demographers up at night. Every single country that hit 1.6 kept going down. Japan thought 1.6 was the floor. It hit 1.2. South Korea thought 1.2 was the floor. It hit 0.72. Why can't governments fix this? Why doesn't money work? Because the problem isn't economic, it's cognitive. Austrian demographer Wolfgang Lutz calls it the low fertility trap. Once a society drops below about 1.5 children per woman, something shifts inside the culture itself. Kids raised in small families grow up and internalize small families as normal. Their ideal family size is smaller than their parents'. Their kids' ideal will be smaller still. It's like photocopying a photocopy. Each generation, you lose a little more resolution. And you cannot legislate what people think is normal. The Romans tried. Literally, Augustus Caesar, the most powerful man alive, passed laws penalizing childlessness and rewarding large families. The Roman elite read the fine print and kept having fewer children anyway, because the conditions that created low fertility, urban life, expensive status games, ambitious careers, were the same conditions Rome had been perfecting for centuries. He was trying to unring a bell. Sound familiar? Here is the thing nobody tells you. And I mean nobody. Even if, starting tomorrow, every woman on Earth suddenly averaged 2.1 children, full replacement, overnight miracle, global fertility crisis solved. The population would still decline for the next 40 years. This is called demographic momentum. It is not controversial. It is not debated. It is just math. The women who are supposed to be having babies in 2045 were supposed to be born in the early 2000s. But those were the years when fertility rates were already collapsing, which means the pipeline of future mothers is already narrower than the pipe that fed it. And that pipe was already narrowing. You can turn the faucet back on. You cannot retroactively widen the pipe. The Lancet, not some blog, the most prestigious medical journal in the world, published a massive global fertility study in 2020. Their projection? Global fertility falls to 1.66 by 2100. Researchers at the Wittgenstein Center in Vienna, who have historically outperformed the UN's own models, put peak global population as early as 2050. Not peak growth, peak people, ever. Some of their scenarios have the global population declining significantly before this century ends. We may have already reached peak child, the moment when more children were alive on Earth than will ever be alive at once again. Not in the future, possibly already. Now. China. China is the single most dramatic, large-scale, deliberate demographic experiment in human history. 35 years of the one-child policy. An entire generation raised as only children. Not just sibling-free, but inside a social reality where one child was legally enforced, publicly celebrated, and structurally normal. When the policy was lifted in 2015, births barely moved. Two-child policy, three-child policy in 2021. Billions in cash bonuses, extended parental leave, housing subsidies, all targeting a youth movement called lying flat. Young Chinese people explicitly refusing to work hard, compete, or reproduce. They looked at everything the government offered, and they kept lying flat. China's fertility rate in 2023, 1.09. Its population peaked in 2022 and is now actively contracting. India overtook China as the world's most populous country. But India's fertility rate has dropped from 5.9 in 1960 to 2.0 today. Below replacement in every major city. Converging fast. The world's two most populous countries, both on the same path. One already contracting. The other lined up behind it with a 20-year delay. And here is the brutal irony nobody wants to say out loud. Every force driving this collapse, women's education, economic opportunity, urbanization, personal freedom, genuine human development, is working exactly as designed. We built a world where people have more choices. They chose fewer children. The more successfully we build the kind of world people want to live in, the faster the floor falls out. There is a concept economists call the demographic dividend. When a country goes from high to lower fertility, there is a golden window, sometimes decades long, where the working-age population is enormous relative to dependents. More earners, fewer children, and elderly draining resources. Capital compounds. GDP surges. This window is substantially why the East Asian economic miracles happened. Japan in the 60s and 70s, South Korea and Taiwan through the 80s, China through the 90s and 2000s. They weren't simply working harder than everyone else. They had a one-time demographic tailwind that made the economic math almost impossible to lose. The window closes, and it does not reopen. Japan hit the wall first. Since the early 1990s, that is, over 30 years, Japan has been managing a shrinking, aging workforce against exploding pension and healthcare obligations. The Bank of Japan held interest rates near zero for 3 decades. 3 decades. Every lever a central bank has, Japan pulled it. Japan's debt-to-GDP ratio, 260%, the highest of any developed nation on Earth. And here is the thing, Japan entered demographic winter as one of the wealthiest, most cohesive, most technologically advanced societies in history. Deep savings, strong institutions, high social trust. Most countries will not have those advantages. South Korea's national pension system is projected to go insolvent before 2055. Italy, at a fertility rate of 1.24, is watching its rural south empty in real time. Villages advertising houses for €1. Not because it's charming, because there is genuinely no one left to live in them. Hungary ran the most aggressive pro-natal program in the Western world for over a decade. Direct cash payments. Lifetime tax exemptions for mothers of 4 or more children. Massive public investment in family infrastructure. They moved the needle from 1.23 to about 1.5. Then it turned back down. Every time this conversation reaches its logical conclusion, someone raises their hand. But what about immigration? I get it. It feels like the exit. Let's run the numbers. Canada, one of the most aggressive immigration programs in the world. Over 400,000 permanent residents admitted in 2022, a national record. And yet, Canada's fertility rate is 1.44. Its natural population, births minus deaths, no immigration, is already negative. Why isn't it working? Because immigrants arrive as working-age adults, which helps immediately. But within one generation of living in a dense, expensive Canadian city, their children's fertility rate is nearly indistinguishable from the national average. Statistics Canada has measured this. The assimilation into low-fertility culture is almost complete by Generation 2. Immigration buys roughly 30 years. Then, the same bill arrives. But here is where it gets worse. The United Nations ran the numbers on how much migration developed nations would actually need to maintain their current age structure through mid-century. The answer wasn't double current levels. For some countries, the required flow would effectively mean replacing the existing population over 50 years. Not supplementing it, replacing it. That is not a policy. That is a civilization-level transformation that no democratic government could implement or survive proposing. And here is the part that closes the door entirely. The countries that send those migrants? Bangladesh, Nigeria, India, Mexico. They are entering demographic decline themselves. The global pool of young people willing and able to emigrate is contracting. Immigration moves people between containers. It does not manufacture new people. Which brings us to the fracture that no official body will state plainly. The world is splitting into two kinds of countries. Old countries, Western Europe, East Asia, parts of Latin America. Aging populations, shrinking tax bases, exploding welfare obligations, and a military recruitment problem that defense ministries are quietly panicking about. Young countries, parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the Sahel, Afghanistan, portions of the Middle East, still demographically explosive. But young here does not mean stable. Many of these nations have enormous populations under 30, with very limited economic infrastructure to absorb them. The combination creates a pressure gradient. Enormous demographic energy flowing from young, underdeveloped regions toward old, wealthy ones. The old nations need the people, but cannot absorb the numbers required. The alternative is economic contraction and a welfare state collapsing from within. There is no clean exit from this room. The Roman Empire ran this exact playbook: shrinking citizen base, aging core population. Rome recruited Germanic tribes into its legions: Goths, Franks, Vandals, offering land grants and citizenship in exchange for military service. The arrangement worked for a generation, but the demographic math ran under. So here is what the data actually shows. Fertility collapse is self-reinforcing once it begins. The mechanism is cultural, not just economic. Policy has very limited leverage. No developed nation has ever reversed it. Demographic momentum means the contraction is structurally locked in for the next 60 years, regardless of what any government decides today. The women who would have had the children to prevent it were never born. That generation isn't here. The economic expansion of the 20th century ran partly on a one-time demographic windfall that is now fully spent. The invoice looks like Japan, and Japan entered this with every possible advantage. Most countries will not. Immigration cannot solve the underlying arithmetic. The sending pool is contracting too. The scale required is politically impossible. And the geopolitical order assembling from all of this, old, shrinking powers and young, unstable ones pressing against each other, does not resolve itself through managed negotiation. It produces pressure, and pressure historically finds its own release mechanism on its own timeline in ways nobody planned for. Every civilization that stopped replacing itself eventually answered the question of what that meant. Some answers took centuries, some arrived faster than anyone expected, and not one of those civilizations, while it was happening, while the numbers were moving in exactly the direction they are moving right now, believed it was actually happening to them. We are, as it turns out, the first industrial civilization that will find out. The experiment has no control group, and it started without our permission.